Disclosing or causing to be disclosed the identity of a whistleblower is such a breach of faith with our whistleblower laws, which are designed to see that the truth gets out. Anyone seeking the release of the whistleblower's identity is frustrating the truth and is potentially in violation of federal law.
Banning the whistleblower is an unpatriotic action. They shouldn't even go near that.
Let me tell Nancy Pelosi something about unpatriotic. This whole scheme, and it is so obvious that it is a scheme, this scheme of keeping a person anonymous and protected in this way while leveraging whatever it is that they say as a means of political, this is a political attack. There is no conduct here that requires the protection of the law for this person now that conduct has been, there's no retaliation they're going to face. I mean, let's be serious about this. What's really going to happen to this person? Oh, the president's going to fire them? That's not going to happen. That would be counterproductive, and I don't think the president would even want to go there. Doesn't make any sense. Why do we have the system that we do? Let's take a step back for a moment. Why do you have the right to confront witnesses against you? This is a central principle in judicial proceedings that involve one side bringing suit or bringing charges against the other. Why do you have the right to confront your accusers? There's clearly a balancing that goes on there, because you are going to have people that have that have to go through cross-examination. Perhaps they're the victim of a terrible crime. They're going to have to deal with people asking them uncomfortable questions. Why do you have a right to do that? And this is central to our system. We put it up there with trial by jury and habeas corpus and some of these, but the right to confront your accusers. This goes back to English common law too. English common law being a foundation of justice in a free society in a country like our own. And Democrats, they don't care about English common law. They just care about power. They just care about whatever works for them in the moment. I really believe that. And the reason that you confront, or you have the right to confront your accusers, and why cross-examination is a part of judicial proceedings as well, is exactly so you can avoid what we see happening here, where a person gets to be on offense and protected. A person gets to, throw missiles at the other side and doesn't have to deal with any incoming. That's why they went through this whole process. By the way, they could have leaked this to the press. There were so many other ways this could go. Why did they do this in this whistleblower proceeding? Because they're trying to use the protections from within the government. They're trying to abuse legal protections in order to wage what is an explicitly political campaign. This isn't even a whistleblower complaint, my friends, because what the president says to the head of a foreign government is not within the purview of an intelligence officer who works for the federal branch. This isn't an intelligence activity. This isn't, we've got a kill squad somewhere that's assassinating rivals in some political race in some third world country. That would be blowing the whistle on something. This is not a whistleblower. This is somebody who says, I don't like what the president did. He's allowed to not like it. Free country, fine. But to pretend that there's something else behind it, to add this gravitas of, he's a whistleblower. And by the way, the name is out there all over the place. The name hasn't been confirmed. It's being reported all over the press that this person is from within. The reports say it's a CIA analyst who is anti-Trump and was known as anti-Trump and was tied in with Biden, close to Brennan. Exactly what I guessed this from the beginning. I said, you're probably talking about somebody who's an analyst from the intelligence community. This would be my guess. And is an analyst who is a clear left-wing progressive, which there are tons of, unfortunately, in the federal bureaucracy now. Because if you go to these international relations schools, or if you're somebody that spends a lot of time overseas and does this, and has a very internationalist view of things, guess what? Places you tend to work are like the State Department or perhaps in the intelligence community. And beyond that, you are more likely to get ahead and advance within that federal bureaucracy if, in fact, you are left of center. It's just reality. It was true. It was true when I was in the CIA. So this guy's identity is not confirmed yet. They're going to fight having to confirm it, because once they do confirm, or if they confirm his or his or her. I don't know. I don't know who the whistleblower is. And people, please stop, sending me emails saying, who's the whistleblower? I don't know who the whistleblower is. All I know is what I read in the newspaper and what I'm seeing now too. And the name is out there if you want to see the name that is being reported as, and also the profession is. It's reported that it's a guy, and it's somebody from within the CIA analytic offices, analytic cadre. Is that true or not? I don't know. But it certainly isn't surprising if that is true, because who would want to go through this process other than somebody who's a deeply anti-Trump partisan? Why would someone take this on? We're going to be told it's because of patriotism, right? But no, sorry. You're going to tear the country apart. Tear the country apart through this impeachment process, and heaven forbid some Republicans, because there are some Senate Republicans who are basically Democrats who just want to win in more red states. Is it theoretically possible that the president could be? I mean, of course it's theoretically possible. I think it's probably a 1 in 1,000 shot that the Senate would remove him, but we don't know. You don't know. Who knows what the press will come up with tomorrow? But the whistleblower, there's no surprise here. And the pretense that this person has to be protected, the identity has to be protected, and there could even be legal ramifications against people that disclose the identity. Well, the identity's all over the internet right now, so I don't know what that means. They're going to go after the millionth person to disclose the identity. Is that how they're going to play the game? But taking it back to first principles of English common law, or some of the first principles that we have in our own system, given that confronting your accuser can result in that person subject to an uncomfortable circumstance and public retaliation, and why is that a part of our system? Because ultimately our system is meant not to just be a system ripe for abuse by partisans. Our system is meant to get to the truth. We are meant to find out what really happened, what really was said. Was a law broken, or did something happen the way that is alleged? The system is meant to get us justice. In fact, we call it the justice system sometimes, though it certainly doesn't feel like it sometimes. And that's why we have the right to confront your accuser. Why we went from the whistleblower must be heard from in the Congress to, no need for testimony. We're not idiots. Although the Democrats are assuming that there are enough idiots or enough people that just, a better way to describe it is they just are apathetic, they don't care. But the assumption that they operate under is that there are enough people who won't care that they can get away with this. That they can get away with pretending that now the whistleblower does not need to be heard from, and that this wasn't a scheme and a scam all along. That Adam Schiff has not been trying to work with people behind the scenes. I think we'll find out that there are some very close associates of people like Brennan and Clapper and others who were involved in this whole process, who think that the government has bestowed on them better judgment than the American people, not remembering in this whole process that the American people are serving the American people, and the desires and interests of the American people is in fact why anybody has any power at any federal agency or institution. It's not to exert their own whims. It's not to put their hand on the scale for a favored candidate or one person or another. That's not what's supposed to happen. But here we are being told that it is a sacred obligation to protect the identity of the whistleblower, when I think we all know that this has been a scam and a sham from the very beginning. Nothing that I tell you seems to turn out to be off base here, does it? It's a Democrat colluding with Schiff beforehand. I'm sure they're going to find out more about this person's politics. There was political bias, according even to the Inspector General, when they put forward the initial report. None of this is surprising. But it also reminds me of something that has come up a few times in my life in media, where companies, corporations, they'll always just quietly say this, but they will say, liberals boycott. Liberals, because they're so emotionally invested in their politics, are much more likely to take aggressive economic action against a show that's conservative, a person who's whatever it may be, than conservatives. Conservatives just have gotten used to, and I think it's because we have much less cultural dominance in the media and in entertainment media in particular. Conservatives have gotten used to just living with things that they don't necessarily like or agree with, but they're adults about it. Liberals want cancel. Liberals want you're gone, you're done, you're shut down, you can't talk. And they take action based on that. Well, I think we've also seen that within the federal government, conservatives like me, when I worked for the CIA, it would never have occurred to me to undermine the commander-in-chief as a CIA officer when I was working, and I did work for a time for Barack Obama when he was president of the United States. It would never have occurred to me in a million years. And I don't believe it would have occurred to any of my fellow conservatives who work in the intelligence community, the CIA, and elsewhere either. But libs, the crazy libs that used to walk around saying that President Trump is a moron, I'm sorry, President Bush, rather, back when I was, President Bush is a moron, he's a war criminal. This was in the CIA. Some of them very senior people. You don't think that they might take it upon themselves to? Sure enough, culturally, the left feels comfortable taking extreme actions based upon their political impulses. We just don't do this on the right. I don't know if the answer is to start being as shrill and crazy as they are, or to try to convince them to stop being so shrill and crazy. But they boycott, we don't. They deep state, we don't. It's just the way it goes. We got Facebook versus Twitter on political ads. This is one of the more interesting debates to come out of Silicon Valley in a little while. You have Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, who has now announced the position that Twitter, a platform that I find very useful for my job, actually. It's a very quick hit way to see opinions and chase down news stories. But it tends to be liberal dominated, not just in the user base, but also, of course, as a company, as is Facebook. But Mark Zuckerberg has become a little bit more libertarian recently. I've noticed a trend toward protecting free speech from him. But right now you have this two-track approach, or this divergent approach from Twitter and from Facebook, because Twitter says that they will not take political ads and that political messages should be earned. Essentially, you tweet something that is important in politics and people retweet it or not, they share it or not. Whereas in Facebook, you can pay for your political ads. The reason that Zuckerberg has come under all kinds of scrutiny from the left here is because he has said, look, we have fact checking and independent fact checkers for things that we run on the platform, but we're not going to play the game of determining what political advertisements run and don't run, and we will take political ads. The left is up in arms about this because they won't admit this, but they got used to dominance on the major social media platforms, especially in the last 10 years or so, that they knew was always favoring their messages, always favoring them in search, in reach, in distribution, whether it's Google or Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, all of them, and more. Snapchat, which, does anybody over the age of 15 use Snapchat? And I'm amazed that Snapchat is still around, but I don't even think producer Mark is young enough to use Snapchat. Do you use Snapchat?
I do.
See, I always think that this is a flawed logic because it's supposed to disappear, but it doesn't really disappear.
No,
like
now
people think that they can take naughty
yeah.
photos on Snapchat, it disappears. It still exists.
Yeah, now it stores it automatically, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on your own
I'm glad
phone.
that they got rid of that in people's minds because people for a while thought, I'll take a photo of anything.
Well, you can screenshot it.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
Yeah.
I don't Snapchat. And also, people, the whole thing about, let me look like a rabbit or something in my. Who wants to take photos of themselves?
That's fun if you're like with your 3-year-old nephew. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, fine. Yeah, but Snapchat's for little kids. Instagram's for the big boys. So, Instagram. That was another one I forgot to mention, but that's owned by Facebook. So, the left is upset at Zuckerberg because they want there to at least be the possibility of exerting pressure externally and counting on internal political bias at Facebook so that when a Republican candidate runs an ad, it's more likely, it's a case-by-case thing, it's more likely to get shot down as not true. But we know Democrat ads, just because of the way that they make noise and whine and complain and can count on all the crazy libs who work in Silicon Valley and work for Facebook, when a Democrat wants to run an ad, the chances are that ad will be fine. And to this, I keep saying, okay, for a Republican who wants to run an ad that says there are only two genders, what would Facebook do there? What would the expectation be? For a Republican who wants to run an ad that the special counsel was a political hatchet job and the president, no charges were brought against the president and the president was exonerated, they're going to say that's false because, well, he wasn't fully exonerated in the report, but he's kind of, yeah, but exoneration is a subjective judgment in that context. So Facebook is going to get in the game of trying to determine what is normal political assessment and judgment versus what is beyond the pale. I'm sorry, I don't think so. I don't think so. That's a bad idea. Twitter doesn't want to take money for political ads. All right, fine. One of the problems that Twitter has is that it's just monetization has become more of an issue for them than it is for Facebook to begin with. But I also understand the Dorsey position because people are saying that he's poking Mark Zuckerberg, and maybe there's some truth to that. But I think beyond that, he just doesn't want to be in the game of trying to call balls and strikes. And his way of avoiding that is to say, we're just not taking any ads in politics. We're not taking anybody's money for political ads. So these are sort of two different approaches. I think both of them have their merits, actually. I mean, I like the Zuckerberg approach a little bit more. But I think that Dorsey and Zuckerberg understand that there is a desire on the left to have this nod and a wink. We know you guys are being neutral, but wink, wink, you're not really neutral. You're supporting truth and social justice, and that means Democrat stuff. I mean, yeah, sure, you'll let the Republicans slip some stuff here and there, but really you're all about truth and social justice, and this is the way that it has been. And this is also why the social media platforms have gotten kind of a wake-up call, where it has become clear to them, or it has become more clear that they can't just engage in, sometimes they're a platform, sometimes they're a publisher, sometimes they decide what content goes up, sometimes they're just a free-for-all utility. That's not going to work either. They need clear rules of the road, or else people are going to start establishing their own social media platforms to compete with them, and that would be their worst nightmare, because ultimately user adoption is really the single most important thing for any of these platforms. And if the right decided to leave en masse, that'd be a problem. I don't know why I said that kind of French. It's spelled French. En masse, but I could have said en masse, I guess, instead of en masse. Justin Trudeau style. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is, just the Ninth Circuit, the federal judiciary in general, is a place where there are a lot of bad judges. Ninth Circuit, people call it the Ninth Circus. The Ninth Circuit is a place where the hashtag resistance judiciary often decides that President Trump is not really the president, doesn't really have the powers of the president, and they have been subverting him, stopping him, sabotaging him at every opportunity. The most recent interesting happening around the Ninth Circuit has to do with a judicial nominee. President Trump nominated Lawrence Van Dyke to be on the Ninth Circuit. And as it turns out, this did not go smoothly, in part because of a letter from the American Bar Association, which I will have you know, even before this case came up, it was well known that the American Bar Association is, because lawyers are now predominantly liberal, left-wing. Lawyers are predominantly Democrats. Not all of them, obviously. A lot of very smart conservative lawyers, a lot of conservative lawyers across the country, but the law profession, go to any law school in the country now, and you will find law professors who are practically communists teaching the law. It's insane. I mean, Elizabeth Warren's out there teaching the law to kids as if she has so much wisdom to impart on them. What Lawrence Tribe also had the dumbest tweet I've seen in a long time. He's a professor, I think professor emeritus at Harvard Law School, and is treated as though he's a serious mind, a serious intellectual. And when President Trump said that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi died like a dog, Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School wanted to know, and I'm not kidding, why President Trump had so much hostility to dogs. Teaching the next generation of elite lawyers, folks. A moron. All right. back to Van Dyke. They say that Van Dyke is not qualified for the Ninth Circuit. This is a hit. This is a smear. Just a little bit of background on Van Dyke, courtesy of my friends at National Review. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Law School, served as an editor of the Harvard Law Review, clerked for Judge Janice Rogers Brown in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, launched his appellate career, served as both the Solicitor General of Montana and Nevada, where he oversaw every important case affecting those states. He has argued over 20 appeals in the federal circuit courts, most in the Ninth Circuit, and has been the counsel of record on 28 briefs before the United States Supreme Court. He's one of the preeminent appellate litigators you'd find anywhere, but not up there with the judges of the Ninth Circuit, who are overturned more than any other. It's the most liberal circuit in the country, or overturned more than any other similar appellate division. And we get into the why here. The ABA, American Bar Association, said he's not qualified. Turns out their chief evaluator for Van Dyke is a Democrat who was a trial attorney in Montana, who donated to Van Dyke's political opponent at one point in Montana. And as you dig deeper into the record here, you find out that in the evaluation, quote, whom did Davenport rely upon in writing? Remember, this is the American Bar Association evaluator of Van Dyke. And this, I'm just taking you through the process of how they smear people now, how the left plays the game. Why do they play so dirty? How do they play so dirty? This is a good example of it. Ruin good people because you don't like their politics. Smear them, undermine them, say they have no character, say they're bad, say they're lazy, say they're racist, say they're homophobic, whatever you have to do. Anything goes. This is how Democrats do it. When was the last time you had a liberal judge who was smeared in this way? I mean, you know, if you want to really know about how easy it is for liberals, go read a Sotomayor opinion on the Supreme Court and just think to yourself, wow, this person's on the Supreme Court. Not as hard to get on the Supreme Court as I thought. But Davenport, who is the chief evaluator here of Van Dyke, said the quote, we can safely assume that at least one person she interviewed was Michael Black, given her reference to 600 pages of publicly produced emails she used in the report. Black was the chief of the Civil Division Bureau of the Montana Department of Justice and publicly opposed Van Dyke when he ran for the Montana Supreme Court, launching personal attacks against him. After Black came out against Van Dyke in 2014, he told the Great Falls Tribune, Black had a long, sort of mysterious vendetta against me. I'm not sure why. Black unsuccessfully sought a seat himself on the Montana Supreme Court, applying for an appointment in early 2014. So you have left-wing people with axes to grind who are at the center of an American Bar Association report that is produced in a congressional hearing about whether or not this Ninth Circuit judge will be placed on the court, or this appointee for the Ninth Circuit would be placed on the court. And then you get to the really ugly moment, and that was why I think this has gotten attention today. Because we talk about the politics and the ideas, the policies, all that stuff. I also have to remember there are human beings involved in all this. And people like Brett Kavanaugh aren't just legal minds who are going to represent opinions on a body of judges. And they're also human beings who have to go home to their families at the end of the day, have to get a decent night's sleep, have their own aspirations, and dare I even say, have their own feelings. They're people too. And I know this sounds a little bit like I'm talking to people like we're in kindergarten or something, but it matters. There's a reason why I always try on this show, even when somebody really deserves it. Occasionally people are dumb and I have to call them dumb, or at least I'll say they're being dumb. But I don't make fun of people's appearances. I do their voices, obviously, but I don't make fun of people's appearances, and I try not to get to the level of degrading someone as a human being and just being really nasty. Because it's not how I am. It's not how any of you are. That's not how you would want this show to be. Democrats do that all the time. I mean, you look at places like the Young Turks. They're disgusting. I mean, the stuff that they'll say about people is grotesque, and anybody who watches that stuff and supports them, I don't understand. And they're just one example. But on the left, whether it's Huffington Post or Slate or Media Matters. I mean, Media Matters is one of the worst organizations in the United States, in my opinion. Media Matters is scum. But they can act that way. It doesn't mean that we should act that way. And the process with Kavanaugh was a real reminder of just how disgraceful they're willing to be and what they're willing to say and do to humiliate and really psychologically torture a person for no crime, for no wrong, other than they don't like what they think. They don't like what they stand for. Doesn't matter that what they think or stand for may be representative of the beliefs of half the country. Unacceptable. Not going to say it's okay. That's their approach. That's their opinion. So judicial nominee Lawrence Van Dyke was being asked about this, and look, the guy got a little emotional. Please play clip 10.
Did you say that you wouldn't be fair to members of the LGBT community?
I'm sorry. No, I did not say that. I do not believe that. It is a fundamental belief of mine that all people are created in the image of God, and they should all be treated with dignity and respect. Senator.
Look, that guy's in real emotional distress there. And I'm sure that there are leftists who are going to laugh and mock him and everything for it because, any man these days who, cries in public, the people that don't agree with their politics will always find a way to try to humiliate them. I just saw a guy who he was accused essentially of being an anti-gay bigot. That's what the Democrats were saying about them. That's what the Democrats writing this ABA report on him were saying. He's a bad person. And if you've lived your life a certain way, if you've lived your life with respect for everybody, treated people well, and have always conducted yourself honorably, it can be a shock. It can be a shock when you are accused of being something other than that. And when there are people who are clearly, if they're not convinced themselves, trying to convince other people at least that you're not the person that you really are. That can rattle someone. This is, for me, bring a lot of this back to what we saw with Kavanaugh. There's no evidence that Lawrence Van Dyke, as a Ninth Circuit judge, would be unfair to the LGBT community, that he does not like people who are gay or lesbian or transgender or anything. There's no evidence whatsoever to present. They just included some rumors about how some of his colleagues thought that maybe that would happen. It's just a smear. I mean, imagine people that politically disagree with you getting to just air out, well, he's never done anything racist, but I think this guy's just kind of racist, so he shouldn't get that job. Imagine you went in for a job yourself, and they did a background investigation on you, and they talked to people who didn't like you, and then publicly that was shown to the world, and some people just said, yeah, I'm not sure that he's a wife beater, but I think he might be a wife beater. Just put that out there. A lot of people understand that this is the nasty political world that we live in now, and that judgeships are sacred to the left because it's how they can get policy done that they can't get through the democratic process of the legislature. So they feel an ownership of the judiciary as an activist body for leftist goals. And when that starts to slip away from their fingers, when all of a sudden they don't have that anymore, they lash out, they act out. Now that's what you are seeing right now. That is the reality of why they go after people like Van Dyke, who has an impeccable resume and is clearly qualified for the job. And the ABA is appalling in putting forward this report, but as I've said, the ABA now, I mean, this is now a left-wing organization. The ABA, the ACLU, you look at a lot of these groups that are supposed to be nonpartisan, and anybody who knows anything and spends any time really digging into it will tell you, no, of course they're partisan. But I guess it's just a reminder that Kavanaugh is not the only casualty of the new left's scorched earth, destroy everybody, pull them down, tear them down approach. That there are others along the way who the left has deemed necessary for destruction. And they're willing to lie, they're willing to be disgusting, and to really hurt people in the process. And it's wrong. What they're doing is wrong. What they did to Van Dyke is wrong. What they did to Kavanaugh is wrong. What they'll do to other judicial appointees is wrong. And we need to stand up and say that.
Government has never made anything better or cheaper, more effective or more efficient. And nowhere is that more true than in education.
Does anyone who knows anything disagree with that Betsy DeVos statement? That government has never made anything better or cheaper, more effective or more efficient. And in education, that has certainly been the case. Does anyone really want to take the alternative side of that argument? Argue that the government is great at cheap provision of services? Let's just walk through, because this has applications to the education system in this country, which is really a form of central planning and socialism at the public school level. It is. We don't think of public education as socialism, but it actually is socialism. It's certainly central planning. And when you look at the spending that has gone into this over the years, we have pretty poor outcomes and keep pouring more and more money into the system because, as I always tell you, that it's a jobs program for adults before it is really anything having to do with educating kids. And now I would just go to if you look at the breakdown of why is it that government can't produce things, services or goods cheaply and well, the answer is that the people who are producing it are not incentivized to innovate and to go the extra mile and to do things they would not otherwise do in order to reach those goals. Of course, government doesn't produce things cheaply and efficiently and better than it does in the past. Everyone who's showing up to a government job, and we're going to say, oh, Buck, what about all the amazing public school teachers? Yes, there are people who are so invested in teaching and love teaching so much that they pay for extra books and they take kids out on field trips they pay for themselves, and those people are wonderful, and that's great and fantastic. The system, though, unfortunately, is not only staffed with those people, and that's for sure. And there are a lot of people in the education system, a lot of people who work for the federal government in general, who they maximize their benefit for their labor by doing the required minimum and nothing more. That's it. Do the minimum means that you get the most for what you put in the government. That is not the way the private sector works at any level, because there's competition and because there are benefits to doing something better than your competitors. So you want to be better than other. Why am I up so late at night researching and writing and doing all these things in preparation for this show? Because I want it to be the best show that you can listen to or watch anywhere, period. Right? Because then there will be more audience. And yes, we make more money here in the Freedom Hut, and I am incentivized to do as much as I can to make this the best that it could be. If I was told that the money is this, and that's what it's going to be, and the audience is the same and nothing else, sure, maybe I love it so much that I put my heart and soul into it, but I don't know if producer Mark would have quite the same opinion of it. He just shook his head no. If we were told that it's this and it's and by the way, if that was centrally planned, if that was determined from on high, well, then everybody would have to have the same audience, right? And the same money, which means that nobody would have much of an audience at all and nobody would make much money at all. That's basically what's going on in the public school system. It is people doing the minimum, people who are trying to keep, and the Democrats are just trying to keep the political machinery going of public school unions voting for them. And then they give more and more largesse and particularly benefits, long-term benefits, because those are easier to hide in a budget. Oh, we're not paying teachers $100,000 a year. We're going to give them amazing health care benefits, though, for the rest of their life after they retire at 55 or whatever, and their family. But we're not going to talk about the salaries. My friends, you can't get around basic truths of economics and also how human beings operate, how we act. Incentives matter. Structuring. Why were we so much more wealthy than the Soviet Union? Huge country with tremendous natural resources. Why? Because the system we had incentivized people to do more and do it better. There is no incentive structure in the public school system. And there would be no incentive system in a Medicare for all system either if Democrats get this. These are the fundamental truths that they cannot explain away and they cannot get around, and it's why their ideas on the left are bad.